Hello, welcome everyone to our Cafecito Cultural. Welcome to our Culture and Diversity conversational panel of this professional learning community group. I'm Rosabel, founder of this wonderful group of professionals that work together to bring culture and diversity to our classes. Today in our Cafecito Cultural, we are pleased to have Jill Woerner. How you doing, Jill?
Hey, hi there. Doing well, thank you. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I'm very happy to have you here today. Jill Woerner is the Director of Education and External Outreach for AFS-USA. After more than 2 decades as a Spanish teacher and school administrator and serving the Indiana Department of Education as the World Language and Global Learning Specialist, Jill continues to support students, Educator, and AFS-USA volunteers to build their intercultural skills and learn how to integrate global competence, biliteracy, and interculturality in their everyday learning environments. She served as the CSCTFL Board of Directors, as well as other states and national committees and boards focused on global competence and language learning. She's one of 5 National Language Teacher of the Year finalists in 2012. Her undergraduate and graduate degrees are in secondary Spanish, education, and educational leadership and administration. What a great bio I have about you, Jill. But today, we're going to be talking about intentional diversity and intercultural learning. Jill, this title that we have choose today, it makes me think a lot, especially with your background that is so interesting for us here in the Cafecito Cultural, culture and diversity. But what is intentional diversity and what does this term means? If you can please explain us today.
Yeah, I appreciate that question because, so just to give everyone a little background, I grew up in a very non-diverse community. And I mean, for all of my years of elementary, high school, all of it. And so the only diversity that I knew of beyond socioeconomic diversity was when our school hosted an exchange student. Other than that, it just really wasn't something that was part of our community. And as I went to college and I studied abroad, and then I came back and I started teaching in urban and suburban and even rural environments, I really got to think about, hey, different classrooms and different schools are missing certain things for students to really have a true sense of who and what the world really is. And so, you can imagine my shock of coming from a community where I graduated with 98 other people, and I went to a university where there's 35,000 people on campus. The international diversity, the racial diversity, cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, all of those different elements were present. And for the first time, I was in heaven. I was like, oh, this is great. People who think differently, they speak differently, they act differently. It was fascinating. It was everything I'd hoped for. And so there are just a lot of places around the United States specifically where in their geographic bubbles, there is not a lot of natural diversity beyond maybe some socioeconomic diversity and some perspective diversity. But in reality, there may not be other elements or other types of diversity that children are exposed to. And so when I use the term intentional diversity, this is the actions of an educator or of a school or even of a community to invite individuals to be part of a classroom, to be part of a school, to be part of a community that can bring new perspectives and share with those who are already in the local community. So when I talk about intentional diversity, that's what I'm referencing is making a choice to expose whatever the audience is to something that's different than what they've been exposed to previously.
Excellent. Yes, I was thinking exactly what does this mean, but a very good explanation. I think now we don't have any doubt about what exactly is that we're going to be talking today, which is also would like to move on and ask you, then what is AFS-USA and how does this connect with the teachers in our group?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that question because, as a teacher, I've been a teacher, school administrator, etc. And, we have to choose very carefully where we spend our time, right? There's only so many minutes and hours in a day. And when I was teaching Spanish at a suburban high school, well, kind of an urban high school, outside of Indianapolis, I had the opportunity to work with students who were part of an immersion program, but they were choosing to go to a different high school where they were no longer in the immersion program. So these schools had tremendous skills in language. They didn't always have everything they needed to know about the culture of the language they were speaking. And so I was introduced to a nonprofit organization called AFS-USA, and that was about 16, 17 years ago. And I, after helping a couple of my students become study abroad participants where they could really dig in and immerse themselves even more so in the country than what they'd had at the school level in their immersion program, but they were able to immerse themselves in the culture. And so I helped students go to Argentina and to Chile. And they came back with just these beautiful accents. They had a family in another country. And so my first exposure to AFS was that they were an organization that supported students to go abroad. Soon after that, I became a volunteer with the organization, where I could support students who came in locally as well. And so I'm going to share my screen here real quick and just showcase just a little bit about AFS, because it truly is an organization with whom I have given 15 years of my life, if you will. And so as a nonprofit, I find that it's important to join an organization or to support organizations whose missions align with your personal attitudes and beliefs. So AFS is one of those. They really believe that whether it's a study abroad program or bringing hosted students in or supporting educators in the classroom with resources and opportunities, that they want to live up to what their founders kind of founded the organization on, which was the premise of, the world wars would stop from these American Field Service, hence the AFS, American Field Service ambulance drivers. They wanted to see that violence come to an end from the world wars. And so they believed that the way to do that was through people-to-people exchange. And so creating a more just and peaceful world starts with young people learning and building relationships with others across the world. So that's what AFS is. It's kind of where it came from. But the other part of AFS is that it is it's a volunteer network. And so I am a part of AFS-USA, but there are volunteers literally around the world in 60 plus countries, where they are supporting students to come to the US and go to other countries, and they're supporting teacher development, they're supporting community development, just a lot of individuals all working toward the same mission of creating that world that is more peaceful for all involved. So that's what AFS is. I think there's probably a lot of teachers in this audience that are thinking, okay, yeah, I get it. Yep. Relationships do help in creating a more peaceful space, at least a more inclusive and accepting space. So.
Oh, okay. Well, wonderful. And yes, they probably be a couple of our educators now asking, okay, I got it. I see what you're having here, but can you give me some more examples of the work that you are doing that applies to educators who are part of this group?
Yeah.
So we can have more an division in here than what we have.
Yeah, so some of the things I've shared already are much more student focused. So those are certainly opportunities that teachers could share with their students. But, thinking from the teacher perspective of how does this help me, right, as the grown up who's leading a classroom, there's a variety of resources out there to help teachers move forward with whatever their goals are for being intentional about diversity in their building, or creating a space for intercultural dialogue and growth, movement toward creating global citizens in their classroom, and so much more. And so one of those tools is what we would call the Global Competence Readiness Index. And essentially it's a self-assessment. It's going to take a teacher about 12 minutes-ish. It may say 20, but most teachers I know can get through it much faster than that. And it's a series of questions designed to look at the landscape of the school building through their eyes as a teacher, and to determine where are they in their readiness and their engagement in global competence initiatives. And after they hit submit and they fill it out, which it's totally free, they're not going to get spammed by a bunch of things when they do it, is a set of recommendations that are going to come to their email about, okay, so if this is where your school is now, these are some steps that you and the school could take to move forward on that path toward being a more globally competent school environment. And while I keep using this term global competence, and I know this is a group that is focused on, diversity and cultural competence, I want to take just a second and kind of define that a little bit. If you don't know or have never really defined what global competence is, it's more than just interacting with the world and being competent or knowledgeable in that way. It really comes down to an individual knowing enough about themselves and having a strong enough self-awareness, moving into a space of understanding others, being able to communicate effectively with others. So think about that from the terms of a language teacher. And also understanding their own emotional reactions in engaging with difference. So if you've ever done any training related to social emotional learning, you've done any training related to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, any of those sorts of things, global competence really kind of marries those two together, and helps bring in that worldly component to it as well. And this idea about taking action. Taking action in a local way to have a global impact, because all of us and all of our students are part of a larger system and network. If we want to make a change in the world, it really starts at home. It starts in a classroom. It starts in a local community. And it's those daily actions that we can change as individuals that really, as a collective, can have a big impact globally. So when we think about global competence, it's everything from me learning about myself and understanding how I fit into the world, but also how I react and manage my reactions to others, to difference, and learning about the world to be able to navigate it respectfully and appropriately, and kindly in a lot of different ways. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you ask about some other resources. So as teachers, I know this is something that was super important to me, which when I was, especially as a newer teacher, I was asked at one point to teach a world language class. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with a world language class? Have these kiddos for a semester. And, I had kids in my classroom who would look at me and say, why do I need to learn a language? Why can't they all just learn English? And
Yes.
and I'm sitting there shaking my head going, oh, okay, I have to find a way to move you through that thinking, through that mindset of being very closed off to the world, and being very kind of egocentric in an American thought process. And so what really helped me were some of these classroom resources. And I only had access to them because I was a volunteer for AFS. So now these are more readily available to teachers. They're on our website, different things are out there. But these types of activities are awesome because the activity themselves, they take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You can do it at the start of a classroom. You can do it at the end of a class. When you've got an extra little bubble of minutes to fill, you can do them on days before spring break, fall break, winter break, when the kids are kind of restless. You can do them on days where students have to take standardized assessments and they don't want to sit there and do any more bubbling or writing or anything like that. And they need a little bit of a mental break. And this gives kids a chance to dialogue, a chance to do something fun, and then debrief after. So if you were to take, for example, listen and draw, I'm a horrible artist, awful. Stick figures are the best that it gets for me. But listen and draw gives the teacher a set of kind of instructions that they can read to students. So a teacher could easily do that in the target language because they're very simple instructions. And the idea is that the student is going to draw a picture following what is really lined out to be very vague, very, very vague instructions. And the 25, 30 kids in the classroom are all going to have a different picture that they end up with at the end of this. And they're all going to show you their pictures, and there's going to be laughter. There's going to be some enjoyment of like, oh my, look at my picture. It doesn't look like anybody else's. It's so weird. Like, what is this? But what really is the takeaway is the discussion that happens afterwards about, quality conversation, active listening, different perceptions that come from the words that someone said. The teacher would give the exact same instructions to all 25 kids, and yet all 25 had a different interpretation of what the teacher said. That relates to their communication styles, the way they perceive language. And that, in itself is a learning opportunity for kids. But they got to do a little drawing activity, and then they have a great discussion afterwards. So in the grand scheme of things, they're short activities, and the teacher can take the depth of conversation as deep as they are comfortable taking it, as far as they want to take it, or as much as they have the time to do and allow for. So, but there are probably 30, 40 of these types of activities with the debrief questions, all readily available and free for teachers to access on the website.
I do love this and see myself already using this at the beginning of the school year as well. And when, like you say, the question of what should it be taking language, or because sometimes they do sign for languages, and then when they get there, there was like I don't know, they might don't externalize what they're thinking, but there could be students in your classes that say, well, I'm not sure, I'm here because my friend is in this class, but why should I learn language? And this is a good introduction of why you here, why you sitting in my class, and we can just keep adding more and then move toward the entire year with this type of I would say activities and resources and everything together.
Yep. Speaking of the beginning of the year, there's a great one about rituals and traditions. And so when you think about bringing a group of kids together, especially maybe a middle school teacher, a teacher who has freshmen, where they're all coming together from different buildings, or think about the fact that you may very well have transfer students or students who are new to the community that are part of a classroom. Well, every school and every teacher has their own personality there. It's its own classroom culture. And so just walking through an activity that talks about, the rituals that are part of school, right? The traditions that are part of that classroom and with that teacher specifically. A student who's been in that teacher's classroom knows some of those rituals and traditions already, but a student who's new to the school or new to that teacher's classroom, they'd have no idea. And so it kind of levels the playing field for all of the students in the classroom while having a fun, interactive activity to think through, okay, this is my new classroom. This is my teacher. These are my classmates. This is how we operate together. It's a very different take on establishing kind of the norms and boundaries of a classroom space than going over a syllabus or working through those classroom management procedures. But the end goal is the same. You're creating community. You're talking about those norms and what is part of the culture of the classroom. It just, you're coming at it from a very different way and bringing in some knowledge and perspective taking aspects of global competence at the same time.
Awesome. Now, you have explained us what is AFS. You have explained us about the educators' resources, and everything looks so much interesting.
Yeah.
But what's the catch? Because it looks like you work for a company. Are these things real free? Or or secretly trying to sell something as a teacher? I mean, I don't get it yet exactly. Like, okay, where is the money part coming? How is this working?
Yeah, so that I love the question, because I do think, I think about when I was a teacher, I'd go to a conference presentation and I'm like, oh, really? Oh, the presenter's from a company. And so they teach you about this great resource, and then they tell you, well, yeah, you only get access to these 3 things. And then if you want the other 25, you need to upgrade to the premium account. Well, really, there is no premium account to AFS, right? Full disclosure is that, the general business of AFS, even though they are a nonprofit, is student exchange, right? So there is this idea that the teachers who are part of our network would kind of believe in the same mission that we believe, and that having international students as part of their classroom, or encouraging their students to study abroad. I mean, that's the catch, right? Is that we would love to have their help in encouraging their students to go abroad, but that doesn't mean they're going to do, help their students pay for it. It doesn't mean that they're, out there pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, finding host families. It just means that they're supportive of having those kids in the building and encouraging those opportunities for students. But all the rest of it really is free. It's readily available on our website. It's not password protected. It's there because we believe as an organization that teachers have a tremendous influence over students. And they are the ones that spark that learning, that spark that motivation to want to learn about the world. I'm an example of that. My Spanish teacher in high school talked about studying abroad in Spain. It had never occurred to me in my little town that was an option until she talked about it in her classroom. Yeah. And so it's that influence that teachers have, and we want to open resources to them so it has an opportunity to prompt those types of dialogues and thinking in the classroom, because any student who becomes a global citizen, they don't have to go abroad to do that. They could host an exchange student. They could study language and culture. There are lots of ways to become a citizen of the world and to engage in global competence and intercultural learning. But, the only catch is really that teachers maybe share where they got these resources with students. If a student comes to them and says, well, I really am thinking about studying abroad, where should I look? Well, send them our direction, right? We'll support them while they're abroad and in the process of navigating where's the right fit country for them. That's the only catch. We're not turning them into a bunch of salespeople. We are not asking for them to subscribe to anything, except maybe if they want our newsletter, which is free 4 times a year, that'd be great. But other than that, we're not asking them for any financial contributions. We just want them to use the things that we're offering because we know it's going to help the kids and the culture of their classroom. So.
Oh, okay. So, well, that very, very good responding to my questions, because I was thinking, okay, now we're going to talk about the monetary part of it. But it's amazing to know that it's free. And you have shared with me already some links for being able to have an educator network, and also the newsletter that you mentioned and the intercultural resources. So we're going to be sharing that on the screen right now. And also, when we go to download the video in YouTube, it's going to be showing on the little comment box so people can have access to all this. Anything else that you want to add today, Jill?
Really just to make sure teachers know that they're not alone. We have a lot of language teachers around the country who are maybe the only one in their building because they're in a rural environment and things like that. And so I don't ever want a teacher to feel like they're alone in being the one who's thinking about the world, and maybe their colleagues in the building are not, especially if they're the lone ranger language and culture teacher in their building. And I just want them to know that they have access to things, right? I think about for free. When the conflict or the war broke out between Ukraine and Russia, we had teachers scrambling to be able to answer questions for students, right? And it doesn't matter if it's a Spanish class, and this is happening in a very different part of the country than where Spanish is spoken. Students are curious. And honestly, in some ways, it's the social studies and the language teachers who have, shown that they understand elements of culture, and they've likely traveled or done some research in different ways. And students trust them to be a cultural informant for them. And so even if a teacher is not well versed on Ukraine or the people of Ukraine or school life in Ukraine, or what's happening in the conflict, we want teachers to see us as a group who can help them be that cultural informant that their students can trust. And so we have these resources available, and they come from a place of informing, so that teachers and students alike walk away feeling that they can look at both sides of a situation and they can make their own judgment about it. We're not shoving a certain mantra down anyone's throats to say, hey, this is how you should believe about it. But here are some facts, and here are some resources, and here are some activities to help you process conflict in the world. To make sense of it and figure out how to, help in a lot of ways. So it's little things like that. And just being respectful of difference. I can't imagine being in the classroom and having students from Russia or from Ukraine, or who had those cultural backgrounds that are part of my classroom, and seeing kids potentially judge or not be kind to the other kids in my classroom. And if I didn't have some of the training that I have, then I wouldn't necessarily maybe feel comfortable in how to interject in those tenuous conversations, or when I hear some of those microaggressions from a student to another student based on conflicts that are happening in the world. Just having resources at my fingertips and knowing where I can go to know that I'm not alone as an educator and supporting my kids, that to me would be really important. So if teachers take nothing more away from this than a space to access others and resources, I hope that's what they can take away. But we're just trying to build bridges and give teachers access to other teachers around the world, and to to resources that are going to help and support what they're trying to do.
Perfect. And I do love the idea. Yes, I do love everything that you have presented to us today. Beginning for being free and completely free access for teachers, and also the networking, which is so much important, so that we can always have resources or ideas from other partners and other educators, and just keep living in, like, united in here in this, right? You are all the way there in mainland. I'm here in Hawaii, maybe met somebody in any other country, Latin America or Europe or so, and then create these forces for our students. That what is important at the end of everything, right? We're doing this for them. And excellent about this. I do love when we were talking about having this Cafecito Cultural, that you were saying, well, educators can meet without even leave their home space.
Yeah.
And I was like, how can we do this? And talk about how often they met.
Yeah, great question. So, so I started these this past year. I called them Educator Meet and Greets because, in an hour, so we meet for an hour live on Zoom. I bring together teachers from throughout the U.S., Hawaii included, of course, and Alaska as well. I don't want anyone to feel excluded. And we bring also teachers from another country. So this is a picture of students from Spain and teachers from throughout the US. We met for 1 hour and we paired everybody together based on the content areas that they teach. So if they're language teachers, we put those together. If they're social studies teachers, we put them together. We had middle school, we had math teachers. I mean, we had teachers of all different content areas. And we tried to do one about each month, roughly. And so as a Spanish teacher, this was a great chance for them to have a partner in Spain. Now, an hour is not long enough for them to map out all of the details of the discussion or pen pal program or, project related to a sustainable development goal or whatever it is that they want to do. But it is a chance to meet each other, start a conversation, understand a little bit about the other one's school and classroom context. So you're not trying to figure those out and decipher those in an email, right? You get to talk about it. They can share their screen and show you their classroom and show you their schedule. And then we share with them the other one's contact information so that they can move forward in a partnership together. And we just kind of step back and say, we're here if you need us, but otherwise now you have a contact in the other country with whom you can build projects together or have discussions together, synchronously, asynchronously, whatever they envision it being. We don't want to dictate that. But what I've heard from so many teachers is that, well, I'd love to do a pen pal program with my students because I value that authentic communication, but I don't know how to find a partner. Well, this is how we can help. So I'm starting to work through the calendar for the next school year to put our different country partners on the schedule. Likely our first one will be September. Just so that we get all of our schools and, up and running, get everybody settled for the school year. And then we'll start putting these on the calendar for educators to attend. And as far as time of day, that's always dependent on time zones, right? So when we have schools, a school in Indonesia, for example, and schools across the United States, including Hawaii, we have 6 different time zones. And then you've got Indonesia that despite the number of islands they have, they're in one time zone. And so, trying to put that on the schedule, it's going to be a little inconvenient. Teachers can still attend with students in their classroom. We just ask that the students kind of have something independent that they could work on so the teacher has some time that they can dedicate to an actual conversation with the partner. But we'll have some Latin American partners join us. I know India wants to join us. So I'll start getting those on the calendar starting in October, and I'm happy to share those out as free opportunities for teachers in the Facebook group for Cafecito Cultural.
Yes, I was about to ask you also that when you have the calendar, when you got everything prepared, if you can please publish that in our Facebook group so the teachers are aware what is coming, maybe a calendar or something, how they can contact you, and of course, all of the links that we're going to share as well. That would be great for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here today and sharing all this so much important resources that we need, and especially now when some educators are enjoying their summer break, but also already thinking about what we're going to do next year, how we can do this and that. So what a way to start the next school year in a few months coming.
Yep. So, and kind of one parting thought, and I don't know the timing of everything, but if there are any young educators, and I put young kind of in parentheses here because there's a workshop that my colleague and I are putting together as part of the youth assembly. The youth assembly happens in New York. So quite a flight for our folks in Alaska and Hawaii and even on the West Coast. But if anybody is middle US or Eastern Coast, or if they just want to take a trip to New York, have at it. But the Youth Assembly is a conference, but it's a global conference, and it's focused on kind of learning to be a change maker. And it's designed for individuals 18 to 32. And there is a specific workshop for educators where they're going to learn about a lot of intercultural learning, learn about the Sustainable Development Goals, and get kind of a toolbox of activities to take back to their classroom. This is one thing totally optional. Unfortunately, the conference, I can say, is not free, but you can still have all the resources without going to the conference. It's one thing that we actually have that's in person, which I'm excited. Mm-hmm. So I'd get to meet some educators if they have an opportunity to travel to New York. So
that's for new teachers, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
just between the age that you mentioned.
Yeah, they have to be 32 or younger, which is funny because 32 seems like a very arbitrary number for me. I'm like, really? So 33-year-old is old? I don't, but
I am totally excluded.
Yes. Yeah, I'm totally out of it. I'm out, right? I can't be a participant. And it's actually really funny because I'm bringing a colleague with me who does fit in that age range. And I'm like, you know what? I should not be the one leading all of these events because everybody's younger than I am. So come and be a co-facilitator with me because, she's in that age range and she's really excited to share these activities that she's done in other contexts, and she really wants to share them with educators. So if there has any chance of being in New York in August, come join us if school hasn't started yet.
Perfect. No, and it's so much necessary because when you're thinking about teachers retention, this is something that it just help them a lot, because it's like you say in the beginning, don't feel alone. We're a huge group of educators working together, and this is an excellent tool for them. Is there anything else you want to add, Jill, before we close this interview today? No, I think that we have covered so much in this little space that we have here in Cafecito. And if it's anything else, educators can just go and join the network that you have, and then of course, why not to subscribe to the newsletter and look out at the intercultural resources that you guys have. It's an amazing amount of things that are there, and that will be now when they go in and read, or they can copy from the screen, or they can just go to the comment box and get the information they need. And also, if there is any ways that they can contact you, like you can share an email at your email or so let's just also to add that to the information we're going to share with them today.
Yeah, absolutely. I can share a quick image that has all of my contact information, so they'll have that.
They can take a screenshot in there right now too.
Absolutely. And I encourage teachers to call, email, connect with us via the website. I mean, any of those. Just let me know what you need. And if it's not easy to find on the website, then just tell me what you're looking for, and I will send you a link, direct you to the right place. Because my ultimate goal is to make sure that all educators have access to the tools that they need to create those intentionally diverse spaces, but also to have a classroom community that is welcoming for everyone involved. But that also includes, some language and some culture and some movement toward that cultivation of global citizenship. So if they ever want to have an exchange student that, has these warm and fuzzy relationships in their community, then there are kids out there, right? And if teachers want to have them in their building, then I can send them student bios if they want, and they can share them with the families in the community. The teachers don't have to be the hosts of these kiddos, right? They get to be the teachers, right? But yeah, this is how we bring about that intentional diversity, especially in rural schools, in small towns, in places where diversity looks different, right? If they want to bring in something that they don't already have, we're happy to help.
So the teacher will be the connection of this the exchange of a student. Not necessarily have to have it in your house, but
Oh
you
yeah.
are making the connection with AFS and how did this work. And okay, so definitely yes, we have to continue with this and get all the information. I would appreciate about that picture if it can be shared in our group as well, so they have an idea about how to proceed with this, and they have the website right there as well. So the
Yeah.
link.
And the cool part of the exchange student piece of this is I think about language teachers, and I think about, those students that I had that would ask me those questions like, but wait a minute, like, why should I learn this? Or, they didn't understand cultural elements related to the kids, or they didn't have a reason to learn the language. Well, if I'm a Japanese teacher and I don't have or even know any Japanese speakers in my community or around that I can bring in as a guest speaker or that I can introduce my students to, then having an exchange student who's the same age as my students, who's there to kind of be that cultural informant and be a buddy, and who speaks that language to be a model of, look, you like Yui, right? She speaks Japanese. She's your friend. She is a reason to learn Japanese, right? She is a reason to learn about Japanese culture. The same thing about Ariel from France. If I'm a French teacher and I don't have any French speakers in my community or in my school, this is such a great opportunity to have a native speaker in the building that can come and talk to the students. When you're talking about school schedules, that student can come and show you the schedule that they operated with last year and say, yes, we had an hour for lunch, or we go home at the middle of the day. And the students are like, whoa. And it's so much more powerful for them to learn that from another teenager than reading it in their textbook.
So when he says in there, add to my students, I mean, if and at some point we have to contact parents, or your association will contact parents and make all the arrangement. So teachers, we don't have to be involved in all this. We just say, okay, let me bring Dewey from Japan. So add to my student, and then you guys take care of the rest.
In essence, yes. I mean, it's similar to that. What is ideal is if, a teacher says, hey, I'm a French teacher. I'd love to have some French speaking students in my school. And they reach out to me and tell me that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send them a page that has, 4 or 8 different students on it from maybe Cameroon, Quebec, France, Tunisia, a variety of French speaking countries, right? Some boys, some girls, and they can send that email to all their students or post it in their Google Classroom or share it on their social media, etc., and say, hey, I want to have a French speaker in my school. Are there any families in our community? Because again, that's the tricky part for schools, is that they have to live in the same community or schools don't let them in. So if a teacher is willing to just share that and encourage their students and families to host, we do everything else. They don't have to answer they don't have to answer 50 questions about, well, what are the requirements? Does a kid need their own room? Do they need their own bed? Who pays for their lunch every day? Like, we'll answer all of those questions for a family. Teacher doesn't need to do that, but if they have a need, if they want kids from a certain cultural background to help diversify their classroom or bring native speakers to their environment, that's where we can help. And the thing that we would ask is that they help us share that those kids are available to be part of that community. And then we will do the rest, right? We'll do the screening of the family. We'll handle the application. We'll do the rest of it. It's just they get to be the one locally to help get the word out to students and families that this is an opportunity for them.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jill. Thank you so much for all these opportunities for our educators, for sharing this important information. I'm very happy to bring this over to Cafecito Cultural and for teachers to see those resources and be able to participate as well. Thank you. I don't have any other questions for you today, but I just super content of that we have this today. I know it's going to be a lot of questions later for you, so I'm sorry you're going to have a lot of
That's all
questions
right.
coming after this.
That's all right. Let them fill up my inbox. I'm happy to share all these free resources because especially over the summer, because that means that they have things ready to go for the start of the year and they can rest easy and get some of those plans done. Happy to help them have a smoother start to the next school year. Teachers have been through enough over the past few years. So it's time for as smooth of a start to a school year as possible. That's what I hope for everyone.
That is correct. Well, thank you so much, and we will see each other pretty soon in the next Cafecito Cultural.
All right.
Adios.
Thank you.